the Thatcher Report again. I am always trying little changes and tweaks. This time, the big optimization is to actually put on a shirt instead of showing you my sexy chest with my tank top when it's like 92 degrees in New York City. Okay, so sex sells, right? So maybe I should abandon the dress shirt. I'm not sure. So this latest Substack essay that I wrote yesterday is called "The End of the Democratic Party, at least as you've known it." So here's the podcast version of the Substack, which you can find at zacharythatcher.substack.com. You can read them, or you can listen to them, or you can view the video. You get the options, and you can find me on Substack.com. It's kind of turned into like a Twitter-like experience of trying not to get too sucked in, but I'm getting sucked in. So you can find me there too. So we've had a lot of the primaries, right? We just had one in Colorado yesterday. These are the summer congressional primaries mostly. And in many parts of the country, whomever wins the Democratic primary, they're going to win the general election because we live in a very divided country and we have a electoral system that rewards single party rule. The same thing is happening in Republican states. I don't know much about them. I only know about blue states because that's where I've lived my entire life. So I follow the blue stuff because there's no point. There's not even Republicans really running for a lot of the offices that I'm dealing with. So I'm an expert on the Democrats. And what we have seen with the primaries, which I've been talking about for about 2 years now, since October 7th, 2023, and I feel vindicated that and it's unfortunate for the country, but I feel like the trend that I've been saying for a long time is really being manifested. So this is the end of the Democratic Party as we've known it. The name is going to stay the same. The color blue is going to stay the same, although maybe it'll become green, which will be interesting to see if that shifts. And green is the color of Islam, if people are not aware, if they've not been to the Middle East. Some cultures and religions has colors. The Jews obviously have blue and white. Christians are far too diverse to really have a color, but in Islam it's green. And obviously environmentalism was green, and now those movements have combined with Islamism. But in any event, the party is going to stay the name is going to stay the same, but the content is going to be really different. And some of the strategies and tactics are changing, and they're becoming progressive. I'm going to use the term progressive, DSA, other terms. They're all kind of synonymous. The DSA is not a very large organization, but they really punch above their weight class. And there's other groups, Justice Democrats, and I don't know the whole taxonomy of the far left, but they're all kind of doing the same thing, even if there are some nuances and differences. Like Graham Plattner in Maine is not part of the DSA, but he's obviously a progressive insurgent candidate. Excuse me. So the Democratic Party is over as we've known it. And all of these recent wins, even since I wrote it, there's another one by an Ethiopian young woman, I think she's like 29 or something, in Colorado. It confirms that the Democratic Party, is in a death spiral. And it's now being reborn into a smaller, more extreme, and more ethically fraught organization. And it's based on two pillars, which are the same pillars that the Democrats have been based on for the past 20 years, about having more discrimination, which I know is a loaded and incendiary way to frame it. We could talk about why, but I think that's it. I think that's true. They want more discrimination and more government. And I'll unpack those two. And that's the program of the progressives, which is also the program of the mainstream Democrats. The party's discrimination is based on their ideas of marginalization and privilege. So it's this kind of binary, and they want to readjust those groups. They don't want the marginalized group. It's a little confusing if you really think about it at a theoretical level, because there's marginalized people and there's privileged people. The marginalized people are queer, people of color, women, trans, gays, sometimes, it's not clear. And then the privileged people are white, and Jews are now considered white in this example, and Hindus and maybe East Asians like Koreans and Japanese or Chinese. It's not super clear sometimes, but that's sort of the idea. And they want to rebalance these things. So then maybe the marginalized people become privileged. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but They seek to certainly support marginalized people through social and economic policies, which is discrimination. They're choosing some people to get ahead while other people are going to come down a peg or two. And so, anti Zionism, anti Semitism, trans advocacy, and preferences for the groups that they've created called people of color and LGBTQIA plus are the favored groups, and these are the favored theories, and then everybody else doesn't get the benefits. And that's just going to intensify. The everybody else is, it's used to just be white working class men, I think were the target, that I didn't notice because I'm not working class, even though I have a lot of working class family. I just am not directly myself working class. I'm white collar. The Democratic Party, like maybe under Obama, was starting to really target the working class white men, straight men, and then of course Jews got targeted after October 7th by the Democratic Party and the left wing, you know, interplay with the media and academia and the culture. So then I started to feel it, and I was like, "Oh, right, that this is how discrimination works. The party is based on discriminating against people that it thinks are too privileged, and white supremacists, which is a very sort of idea maybe from the middle of the 20th century, like with the Nazis or the KKK or something, but that's still alive in their mind, and we gotta fix that, and the heroes are the downtrodden victims who are then heroicized are LGBTQIA plus POC. Those are the letters. None of that's real, right? There's no such thing as people of color that come from people of coloristan. There's not, it doesn't make any sense. You could say, well, there's black people and then there's like brown people. Maybe that means Latinos. Does it mean South Asians? I don't know. It's like it gets a little fuzzy and weird to think about people based on their skin color, but that's a real thing. People of color is a rubric that's not going to go away no matter how much I podcast about it. And then the group LGBTQA plus, I don't even, not a, totally clear. I think it intersex and asexual is the I and the A. But I don't think that's a real group either. I don't believe in any of this stuff anymore. I don't think we should have a Pride Month really, like as an LGBTQIA thing. I think that there are gay people and then there's everybody else. So the whole queer thing, I don't think really exists. Like you can be queer but not gay. I don't get it. Bs, the bisexuals, they seem like they're winning. Trans seems like a completely different category that has nothing to do with gayness or being lesbian. And then, of course, intersex versus trans. Okay, not sure what the nuance there is so relevant for promoting them over non-intersex people and why they should get a specific benefit that I don't get or my family doesn't get. And then asexual people, so they deserve special benefits that I'm not allowed to get because I'm obviously pro-sexual as a father, as a kid, at least once, right? And then the plus, what does that mean? Everybody else, but not me? I don't know. It's very confusing, LGBTQIA+. So I think that term is not aging very well, and we're going to see already a split between gay men and maybe lesbians. I don't have as many close lesbian relationships, but more with gay men, and I can see that the split is happening for some of them. But those are the rubrics. Those are the winners: POC, LGBTQIA+, and everybody else, which is white men primarily, and oftentimes women, are the losers. And then let's talk about more government. So that's the discrimination part, and then the more government part of the progressive part group within the Democrats is expansion of government. Is just another way of saying democratic socialism, right? Bernie Sanders is a really smart guy. He's been saying the same thing literally for like 30 years. I learned about Bernie Sanders when I was in high school in 1990 or maybe 1989. I learned about him as a congressperson from Vermont, and he was a socialist back then. That's a really long time ago, and he's still saying the same thing. I'm from New England, so that's how I, just Massachusetts. We kind of knew about other things happening nearby in Vermont, and that's essentially an expansion of government, right? And this current term, the hashtag or whatever, is democratic socialism, but it's not any different than what Democrats have been saying for many, many decades. It's just more of it, which is I think the democratic socialist moment that we're living in, where you're having all these socialists, people saying we're socialists or democratic socialists as a modifier, that's just the natural conclusion of democratic tax and regulation policies for the past, I don't know, since Jimmy Carter or something, which is, and Bill Clinton was like a blip of an exception. And then we went right back to it with Obama and Biden, that we have more state involvement in the economy, and which maybe involves ownership of certain things, ownership of more infrastructure, key industries. But the twist of 2026 that we didn't really have as much before, not as clearly stated, is that we're going to layer discrimination on top of this expansion of government. So we are going to dole out some of the benefits, right? Subsidies, and we are going to dole out some of the detriments, the punishments, and taxes according to preferred people based on their skin color, gender, and sexuality. And this is what progressives called racial equity. So I know it sounds like, Zachary, you're so extreme. You're talking about discrimination all the time when all these nice Democrats who just kind of like want to recycle and do nice things. But I really think if you look at their policies, this is what it's about. Zohran Mamdani, obviously he's an easy target. People make fun of him, but you have to take him very seriously. He, maybe later I'll get into this, but I think he's emerging as the leader of the Democratic Party, at least for now. And these things go quickly, right? Andy Warhol talks about your 15 minutes of fame. Social media made that come true. So maybe his fame won't last very long, but I don't know. He's kind of young. He's handsome. He's telegenic. He's awesome at social media. People like him. So, he wasn't born in America, so he can't actually become the president, but he's emerging as a kingmaker. And so maybe so something to think about. But Zohran Mamdani in New York, writ small, is having like racial equity programs for housing, right? So what does that do to people who aren't favored in this racial rubric? This is discrimination. This is racism and discrimination, just with different euphemisms to wrap around it. Now, whether or not you agree with that or not, that's your own conclusion. That's the beauty of living in democracy. But I have a problem with it. I don't think it's moral. So we have discrimination and economic governmental expansion, and then there is an interplay there because people are going to be punished with taxes, and some people are going to be rewarded. All right. So the big question is, what the heck is happening? Why is this happening? Why are these young progressives, right? They're often people of color. There you go. I'm stuck using the rubric too. More and more of them are Muslim. Not all of them, obviously, not Graham Plattner, but there tend to be some commonalities, and it's all across the country. Anybody who thinks this is just in like the coasts are missing what's happening in Colorado and just yesterday. And it's happening everywhere, right? It's going to be happening everywhere that's deep blue. So that's the Northeast, that is Illinois, Minnesota, Colorado, and then obviously the West Coast and other pockets that I might be missing and I can't even think of on the fly right now. But that's what's happening. The Democratic Party is basically only in big cities. It's a really urban party, right? The rural areas have become more and more Republican over time. I don't really see that changing anytime soon. I don't think there's anything that the Democratic Party talks about or speaks to really rural interests, which are quite different than city interests, and certainly a lot more about self-sufficiency and maybe awareness of government expansion and more of a do-it-yourself kind of attitude. And they have their own environmental, whatever, lots of other things. So the Democratic Party is an urban party, and these are where the big cities are. Is what you look towards trying to figure out where the party is active, and then I think it's everywhere that it's active is becoming progressive. Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Boston, New York City, Chicago. Maybe keep going, right? Think of all, certainly the Bay Area. There's just more and more cities that are fitting this. Denver, Colorado. It's just, I'm not saying that it's spreading, but it's taking over everywhere that is already deep blue. So how did this happen? How did these young upstarts, Chevalier And I have to look it up, and I'm talking to you right now, but the young woman, the Ethiopian woman in Denver, how are they just taking over, right? It didn't stop with AOC, right? That was just kind of like a signal from years ago, but now it's happening more and more. Why is this happening? Why are these people shoving out incumbent Democrats? Remember, these are the primaries. So we're not even in a general election. We're just talking about the party fighting with itself. And they're canceling more older incumbents, often who claim to have a progressive viewpoint, right? And it's happening. Sorry, I'm having a technical little blip here. And why is this happening? Well, the one thing to blame is the party leadership, right? They're feckless, right? And we'll talk about what's going on. This is Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, people I don't even know the names of who are running the Democratic National Committee. And there's the DSCC and the DCCC, or the DTRIP, they call it, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. And those are all these leaders, right? They're all having the same problem, because they're all seeing this insurgency, and they're literally losing their jobs and their income and their power. So that's a problem for them. So that's partly to blame. Is just the leadership dynamic and how they're weak. But it really, I think, what's really to blame, or what's really explains this shift, is that the entire foundation of the Democratic Party, which I'm telling you is based on discrimination and governmental expansion, it's rotted after the civil rights movement. It has no more direction after the incredible wins of the civil rights movement, which I think you can safely say ended in 2015 with marriage equality for gay people. Huge wins with Black integration, huge wins with second wave feminism. It's kind of hard to imagine a woman not qualifying for a credit card, but that happened like in the 60s and 70s. And huge wins, obviously, for gay people. I'm not going to say LGBTQIA+, because that's sort of nonsensical term at this point. It's really just a political faction from an actual ethnographic group, demographic group. Gay people, that's a real thing. Now they've become mainstreamed in where I live. I don't know what it's like in a hardcore Republican area. That might still not be, it might not be as accepted for gay couples. I don't really know what it's like in Alabama or Mississippi, or I don't know, parts of Arizona or something. But in my world, there's just mainstream now to have like a gay married couple or a straight married couple. It's not really something we think about. And then obviously Scott Bessent as the Treasury Secretary in the Trump administration, it's not something people talk about, that his being gay. They talk about him maybe throwing a punch at somebody in the cabinet, or threatening to throw a punch at somebody. They don't talk about him being gay. It's just not something that Republicans are interested in. So that's a signal that it's kind of normal everywhere. The entire foundation of the Democratic Party hasn't changed since the Civil Rights Movement. And I would say, and now this is more my opinion, editorializing, but it's focusing on identity supremacy and poor economic performance mixed with graft. There's all the corruption, Medicare, and all the scams. And now we're seeing the fruits of that. As Ernest Hemingway said, bankruptcy happens gradually, then suddenly. And so now we're seeing the suddenly part. I don't think that the Democratic Party has not been able to find an organizing principle since the Civil Rights Movement. The Republicans have with MAGA. And we say the word MAGA, it sounds like a sound, MAGA, 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 MAGA. It's like it sort of loses its meaning, but it's about making America great again. Now, I have a lot of problems with the again part. I don't think that makes any sense. I think we should be progressive in the sense that we should always just try to make this country better. But at least they're talking about America making America great. I'm going to take the first three letters appeal to me. Making things is really important. We need to make things in this country. We need to manufacture things. We need to grow food. We need to build things. We used to do a lot more of that in the 20th century. We stopped doing it and outsourced it to third world country dictatorships like China and so on. And that's not working very well for us right now. So I think we need to make things. and obviously a focus on America and greatness are great. Every country should aspire to greatness. We'd have a much better planet. Um, so Republicans have an ideology that has changed with the times, right? It's why it's appealing to working class people. It's not because they're evil or bad people or racist. And I used to say some of these things and I was wrong. It's because they lost economic opportunities. And now the Republicans are saying, we're going to give you more economic opportunities. Now, whether or not that happens, I don't know. I'm skeptical of it. The Republican leadership, Trump's leadership, seems much more focused on enriching themselves and kind of giving crumbs, and crumbs in the form of lower taxes and things which are great, and fewer regulations. Those are great. Those will spur the economy over time. But the Trump administration has no real ambition, it seems, to dramatically, quickly, materially change the lives of working class people. I'm not seeing that. They're doing great things with immigration. They're changing the immigration policies, which we're told takes away jobs from working class people. The regulations, the taxes I talked about, those are kind of big macro moves, but do they have immediate impacts on somebody trying to afford a house or trying to pay for a class so they can become a mechanic? Ford says they need a lot more mechanics for internal combustion engines. Okay, is that even a good move? I don't know, but you got to work now and worry about stuff later. So, but at least the Republicans have changed, and the Democrats, my argument is they have not changed. They're still thinking it's 1964. There's segregation. There's Jim Crow. We are the heroes. The white people are the villains, and we're going to fix this country, and we're going to make it a moral country. And they're still talking about it. And so this progressive takeover, I think, is just kind of like the inevitability when you have these kind of ideas. So let's talk about a little bit the leadership angle, and then we'll go back into the ideas. So in late April, Chuck Schumer, the head of the Senate, endorsed Graham Plattner. So this supposed working class man who has a six-figure subsidy from his mom. I don't know that many working class people who enjoy that. He's a far left, non-DSA, but he's a progressive and he's an insurgent, right? By definition, he's not a politician. He won his primary, so he went against the establishment pick, and he got Chuck Schumer's endorsement. Now, Chuck Schumer is somebody that's important to pay attention to for two reasons. One of them is because he's the most important leader in the Democratic Party as the as the Senate minority leader, and he's the most prominent Jewish American politically in this country right now. Well, certainly in the Democratic Party, maybe Jared Kushner, or there's other Jews in the Trump administration that you could argue Steve Wickoff or something actually wield more power. But it's a really big deal that he's the highest elected Jewish official in this country ever, in this country's history. We've never had anybody higher than that. So to me, that's an important symbol. And obviously, he's the most powerful Democrat. So how did this political novice in Maine get the most powerful Democrat down on his knees and giving him an endorsement? Like, why would Chuck Schumer even do that? Chuck Schumer had a decision. He could have denounced Plattner for his many, many weaknesses, starting with a Nazi tattoo, his horrendous treatment of women, his racist comments, his kind of leveraging his supposed PTSD from his military service to explain all the bad things. Does every veteran then get a pass? Does every veteran who commit a crime get to blame it on something else? Now, I'm very sympathetic to veterans and what they've been through, but constantly blaming your behavior on your military experience doesn't seem like it's a great look for other veterans. It doesn't seem like the right thing. Schumer could have denounced him, and or he could have ignored him, I guess, or he could have endorsed him. So he endorsed him, and that is an announcement of weakness. And I didn't understand at the time, I wasn't really paying attention in late April to it, but when Chuck Schumer says, oh, the insurgent gets my endorsement, Chuck Schumer is saying, I'm no longer the leader, right? Now, forget about Graham Plattner and his specifics. He's easy, like Zohar Mamdani. A lot of people on the right pile up on him, but just forget about it. He's a guy running for office. He's a real politician. He's got real money and support behind him. And if you're the leader and you endorse a insurgent, then that's your capitulation as the leader. Like I'm reading this like mafia crime novel right now, and these are all the dynamics. You just then you're not the leader. Chuck Schumer is no longer the most important Democrat. I think that's very clear as of today. Literally as of today, he's no longer the most important Democrat. He's just a guy with seniority, and he's going to be pushed out at the first possible moment. I think that's going to be in early 2028, and I'll get a little bit later into this, but I'll just do the spoiler now. It's really dumb to make predictions because they're usually wrong, but just to see what my thinking is, see if I can persuade you into this argument that the Democratic Party is completely changed at this point. I think Schumer is going to announce his retirement in February or January 2028, right? To give time, or maybe even late 2027, like a year and a half from now, to give time to the other Democrats in New York to run for his seat. What I think. I think that would be the smart thing for Schumer. If Schumer would have run for the primary for Senate in New York, I think he would lose very quickly. He's Jewish, he's old, he's pro-Israel. He's not what the Democratic Party wants anymore. And I just think he would lose, and it would just be, maybe personally humiliating, and he could avoid all that. But the whole thing is humiliating already. He's already humiliated and debased himself by endorsing an insurgent. You're just like, okay, I'm just powerless. Just like stick my, dick in a jar, like you're done. And this is one of the reasons why the progressives are doing so well, because they're not facing any headwinds from the leadership. And I'm trying to like stick to my essay here, but I kind of like extemporizing about this. The progressives have the leadership on the run. And I have a little digression here about the never Trumpers and like maybe the never progressives. So we saw this happen before. We've seen this movie 10 years ago with the Republican Party, and now the Democrats are just catching up. And DSA is the new MAGA, It's kind of obvious analysis. When Trump was in the process of taking over the Republican Party, and it's not just Trump, he has a philosophy. Now, obviously, a lot of it is his charisma, and he's going to retire, and who knows what happens to MAGA. Maybe it's just sort of like Obama. It's all about Obama. And then when Obama's not running for office, the entire Democratic Party fell apart when Obama stopped running for office. And now they're going through this radical change. But so maybe I'm wrong, and maybe MAGA, I'm just more of a nerdy intellectual guy who likes theory, and it's just Trump, 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 and then he's going to retire. He's 80 years old, and then the whole Republican Party falls apart. I don't think so, because there are smart people in the Republican Party, like Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance. I don't like him, but he's smart. So I'm not sure. But the point is that when Trump was rising to power, there was a phenomena, mostly in the media, of never Trumpers, right? They were Republicans, they were conservatives, they didn't want taxes, they didn't like regulations, they liked American primacy on the world stage, but they didn't like Trump for all the obvious reasons, because he breaks a lot of conventions. He's kind of crude, according to establishment people, and it's so apparent how corrupt and how much graft there is. I mean, it's amazing, the billions and billions of dollars that he and his family make while they're in office. I mean, it's just obvious. It's just right in front of your face. Like they'll sell you meme coins and colognes and stuff. Like they're not hiding. They're leveraging the office to make billions of dollars. So that's kind of a problem for a lot of people, ethically, me included. So there were these never Trumpers, and now we're seeing never Trumpers, sort of the left wing version, and they just they're going to lose. They're just going to lose the argument, and they're just going to be irrelevant. But we have them right now. I think these never progressives are going to exist for like another 6 months, and then they'll go away, because we'll see what happens with the fall elections, I guess, and then we'll reevaluate. But the people on the left, mostly in the establishment media, but in many other areas, and older, anybody over age 40, generally, they are sort of minimizing all of these wins that the Democratic Socialists of America and other allied progressives are having across the country. They're sort of saying it's not that it's not happening, but there's lots of exceptions. Hickenlooper won his primary, but he's old. He's not going to be around forever in Colorado. But they're saying, oh, it's just sort of here and there. It's like these smelly college kids protesting Jews on campus. That was just like a tiny minority, and this is just like a tiny minority of people. And I'm telling you, all of those commentators all of them are wrong. They don't get it. They don't understand three things. They don't understand the anger in the left base that's making these progressives popular. They don't understand the dynamics of left wing political theory dating back from the civil rights movement. They don't get what they're selling in a way. And they don't understand how power works clearly, because we're seeing a transition of power today. This week, we're seeing a transition of power for the past several months. And they don't seem to understand how power works. I really like the Nancy Pelosi quote: power is not granted, it is taken. And we are seeing people take power in the Democratic Party. So just look at the establishment capitulations to the insurgency, which is just a fancy word of saying groveling. And I'm repeating myself, but a leader says an insurgency is valid, then it's only a matter of time before the insurgents take over the leadership. That's the definition of an insurgency. Appeasement doesn't work. And how could it, right? The progressives are very clear about their intent. They're not here to moderate. Their point is they're an alternative to MAGA and the establishment Democratic Party methods as we've known it. This is their mission. They're totally open about it. They're not like hiding it. To think that if you give an inch to these people, they won't take a mile, when all they talk about is traveling in miles, is pretty stupid, or it's weak. And I don't like calling people stupid. I don't think Chuck Schumer, I don't think they're stupid. These people are much more powerful and much wealthier than I am. They're really smart. I just think they're weak. And this weakness extends to the mainstream media, which I think it's safe to say now by the middle of 2026. And I'm older myself, so I'm always late to these trends. So I'm just getting caught up. And I have a million and one opinions about how I consume media, so I'm a little idiosyncratic. The mainstream media is kind of becoming a cultural relic, like opera or ballet. One of the interesting things to notice about culture is that old forms of culture don't just disappear. Records didn't disappear. The opera or, going to see a play didn't disappear with the advent of movies. It just gets smaller and more elite, basically, right? I happen to love opera, and going to a symphony seems like a good idea to me. People still do it, but it's a very small group of people. And it just tends to cost an enormous amount of money because whatever, for all the obvious reasons, there's no economy of scale. Whereas you can just look at videos on TikTok for free all day long. You just have to subsidize the price of an iPhone and a data connection. So there are some costs, but you amortize them. So that's what's happening to the mainstream media. They're just kind of becoming a cultural relic. Sure, some people are going to care about them the same way some people are going to care about the opera or going to the ballet. And it signals to other wealthy elites, oh, I'm very cultured, I go to the opera, right? I am a smart person is kind of what you're saying, and I have cultural sensitivities. I think that's going to be the same thing. I don't think the New York Times is part of what I'm talking about. I think the New York Times is still really big, but I'm sort of thinking about broadcast media, even CNN and stuff like that. But many of those people, including at the Times, are kind of debating or ignoring this transformation. And what's funny is that the left-wing base who are voting for this transformation, they're not really paying attention to these opera people in the mainstream media. They're using social media, Substack, and podcasts for their information. They don't really care what's being debated. I'm sort of saying two things about the New York Times. It's both the dinosaur and it's relevant. And I know that's a little bit paradoxical, but they sort of represent the dinosaurs in a digital medium, so it does still reach people. But I just think that it's not as effective as young people watching Instagram videos and listening to podcasts. So there's just a lot of competition in this new digital space. So the New York Times is kind of a really interesting communication entity to pay attention to. But nevertheless, the DSA 30-year-old, the 30-year-old voting for Zohra Mamdani, I don't think they really care what the editorial board or the opinion pages or even the front page of the New York Times has to say. I don't think that's as relevant to them. And here you go. They're voting in a really different way that I don't think a lot of the people at the establishment media really understand. They don't understand it. They don't understand the power dynamics. They don't understand the theory behind it. And what else don't they understand? And they are just, there was another, oh, and they don't understand the anger, right? These people in the establishment media tend to be pretty wealthy, pretty successful people. They might not have like billions of dollars in the bank, but they have a lot of social prestige because they went to like really good schools and they're cosmopolitan, right? They tend to be very well traveled. They tend to own their own homes. They're doing pretty well in this society with a dwindling middle class. So I don't think they get the anger so much in the street. Some of them do. I'm sure some of them do, but I don't think they get all three things, which is the anger and the power dynamics and the theory that the Democratic Party has not evolved in 50 years. They're not going to agree with me about any of that stuff, but I think it's true. So this is all another way of saying that the Democrats as a party, with the progressives, with the mainstream, they're just inherently weak right now, right? There's lots of interesting people who are smarter than I am talking about the weakness of political parties because of finance reform after Watergate. So I'm not going to go into those rabbit holes. I just think that it's kind of obvious that we're seeing the weakness, right? Chuck Schumer just seems like a weak political figure, I think, to the entire country. Hakeem Jeffries, also a New Yorker. Oh, and guess what? He's a person of color. So that should really rescue him, right? For the progressives. Well, I don't think he's going to remain his speakership for very long. I think in 2028, so here's another prediction. I think in 2028, progressives will be a plurality within the House Democrats. I don't know if they'll have a majority or not for the whole country, but there'll be a plurality, and I don't see them voting for Hakeem Jeffries. And listen, this guy is really smart. He's obviously an amazing political operator to be where he is in life. So if I'm saying this, he probably thought about it like a year ago, but I think he's stuck in a trap, and I don't think he can get out of this trap as a Democrat. So here's like some more examples of what I'm talking about to prove my points, which I think are really provable. You're not seeing at the DNC leadership level mounting a defense of their values against the progressives. There's no sister soldier moment. You're not seeing anybody, Jewish or not Jewish, which is kind of more interesting to me maybe than to you if you're not Jewish listening to this, but it's still kind of a neat thing to observe. Even Jewish politicians on the left are not denouncing a guy with a Nazi tattoo. That's kind of interesting, right? And something I read earlier today, so I'm cribbing it from somebody else. But if like Ted Cruz was found out to have a Nazi tattoo on his butt cheek, right? Or some Republican had a Nazi tattoo, they go crazy. The left wing go, oh, he's a Nazi. That's terrible. How could you possibly vote for him? But when a guy running as a Democrat has a Nazi tattoo, and he knows what it is, he's not a stupid guy. They're okay. Even the Jews are like, well, Nazi schmazi, who really cares? You're not seeing a single Democratic leader in public denouncing the progressives. And I think I know why. And we also know from polling, such that it is, that a lot of these DSA type progressives are not going to play well for a national audience, meaning at a presidential election. That's the only national election we have. They're probably not going to do well, right? It just seems kind of obvious that most of the country, based on the Trump-Kamala Harris election, and based on the Trump-Biden election, and based on the Trump-Hillary Clinton election, we have a bunch of things to look at. We know voting behavior with Trump on the ticket, for sure. It just doesn't seem like they're popular, but still a mainstream leader won't denounce them. Now, why is that? Isn't that weird that there's nothing? We saw lots of things in the Republican Party denouncing Trump or progressing fealty to Trump. It was a super polarizing moment, and there was lots of fighting. in the Republic. We're not seeing any of that stuff. And they always say it's a civil war, but okay, I'm not hearing any harsh words from Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or any of the leaders. Um, and it's also kind of interesting to say, okay, how come they're not being criticized from within? And there's no risk. Bernie Sanders is the political mascot of the progressives, but is he really their leader? I don't know. He's really old. He's not. Maybe he would have been 20 years ago, but it's not like Chuck Schumer is going toe to toe with a Trump, and then it's like a charisma battle that you're just going to lose, right? And Hillary Clinton lost, and Biden almost lost, and it's you're not. They don't risk as much, but they're still not going against. Still, the leadership isn't going against the progressives. Now, the leadership doesn't really have a single leader either. The only single leader of the establishment would be Barack Obama, right? He is like, Democrats hate it when I compare Obama to Trump, but I really think it's a really similar phenomena. Trump is loved by many Republicans. He really, it's like physical, like they have emotional love for him. And I, as a somebody from the Democratic side of the aisle my whole life, I've experienced that same love for Obama. They literally love him. They think he is like their best friend, their dad, a revered figure. And I'm not here to dive into that so much, but I'm just saying Obama maybe could be considered the leader of the establishment. However, he just did his final bow on the world stage by spending nearly $1 billion. It's like $850 million on a single building. And maybe it has a little campus, but a main building in Chicago, the Obama-lisk. That's his great final act on the public stage, is to spend about $1 billion on himself. And what many of us have suspected, he's the new Ozymandias, which is reference to the poem. Ozymandias is the Greek name for Pharaoh Ramses II. I'll get back to the Pharaoh. But that makes the Obama-lisk makes the gold Trump statue really unambitious. That's like kind of a small statue compared to the Obama-lisk. So I don't think the Democrats are going to have Obama anymore as their leader. I think he's announced that the final culmination of Barack Obama's career was to erect $1 billion building to himself that towers over Chicago. I think that metaphor and the fact that they're even calling it an Obama-lisk, like an odalisque from the Egyptian pharaohs, obelisk, I think I maybe mispronounce it, that is Obama. That's his final act. It's this great pyramid obelisk to himself. So the Democrats don't have a leader on either side, it makes the entire enterprise very weak. So there's not a civil war. The leadership can't disagree with the progressives. I'll get into that in a second. And that just makes the whole party weak. And I think that we're going to see it shrink, meaning electorally. I think they're going to earn fewer votes over time. I can only look forward maybe 2 years, 3 years at the most. I just think they're going to lose votes. The Democratic Party itself, it's already been shrinking in the electorate. I think that's going to accelerate, except the one big exception is if a charismatic leader emerges. They're very hard to predict. Now, maybe really astute people could say Barack Obama, Bill Clinton were not so hard to predict, but that's like super inside baseball. Generally, they kind of came out of nowhere, and they both won 2 terms and left their marks briefly on the Democratic Party. The new Democrats under Bill Clinton are totally gone. Obama was really about Obama, and obviously Trump is a reaction that the voters preference of Trump in swing states. Forget about losing the national popularity contest or the national election. That's important, but you got to look at the swing states. That's where the action is in this country. And they went for Trump in 2016. So there goes Obama. So how much of an impact did he really have on the party? It seems like or Clinton. So, but if a new leader emerges, and I don't think it's Bernie Sanders anymore, I just think he's too old. But I don't know. He's got a lot of whatever the expression is, spit and vinegar. So he maybe he does emerge, and I'm talking like 20 later this year in the elections, and then into 2027 as we get ready for the next presidential election. But if a charismatic leader doesn't emerge, then I just think the party is going to shrink and intensify. Okay, so they're lacking a leader. That's one thing. The other problem that I keep on talking about is ideological. And that's why I don't think you're going to see Chuck Schumer or any leader denounce a progressive. You haven't seen it yet, and I don't think you're going to. They might mumble and grumble behind closed doors because they want to hold on to power personally. But progressives, no matter what they say, they have a new start, they want to kick out the establishment. They really aren't against mainstream liberals. They're for them 100%. They're just more dedicated and more honest and more pure about their intent. So the mainstream establishment, whatever you want to call it, mainstream establishment, centrist, the Democrats over 50, whatever you categorize it, and the insurgent progressives, the Chevaliers, this young woman in Denver, Graham Plattner, Bernie Sanders, different ages, different backgrounds, they all believe the same thing, right? There is no ideological difference in the Democratic Party between the establishment and the insurgency that we're seeing. They think that we're litigating slavery. That's what the discrimination comes in, or reverse discrimination, or DEI, or whatever you want to, euphemism you want to call affirmative action, right? Well, that's not very affirmative if you don't get in because you're white or you're a disfavored Asian. It doesn't sound very affirmative to me. So, who is it affirming and who is it denying? So they're litigating slavery. This is really the theory beneath the racial civil rights movement stuff from the 20th century. They're litigating slavery, and they honestly believe, all Democrats honestly believe that if you have more government spending and more regulation, you will lower inflation and reduce economic inequality. Now, that's empirically not true. There's no evidence of that in any blue state. The blue states are the most income inequal in our country and the most unaffordable. But nevertheless, they continue to believe this. And you just look at Zoran Mamdani or Gavin Newsom. They're kind of different people, but they all do the same thing. Or the new taxations in Hawaii, which I've been reading about. It's all in Colorado. It's all the same stuff. There's no ideological daylight between these factions. The only difference is strategy and tactics. So that's why the Civil War is a misnomer, right? It's a strategic and tactical differences, but theoretical, it's the same. Now, what's interesting is how this relates to the power dynamic that I don't think the mainstream media understands. The Democratic leadership can't criticize or denounce progressives, right? Because they believe the same thing. They can't say, well, I don't know, you're kind of anti-Semitic, you're kind of, all this trans stuff. They all believe the same things. And I'm conflating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism because it's kind of like it's all about the Jews. But even ignoring that for a second, you can't criticize, the mainstream can't criticize the progressives for taking them seriously. That's what's happening. The progressives believe the mainstream stuff. Yes, it's still the civil rights movement. Yes, not having Black only congressional districts in the South is bad, right? We should have racially defined for a couple of people because of Jim Crow. And maybe we're going to have Jim Crow again. I don't know. That seems like to be what they think. And you can't criticize people for taking you seriously. That's a losing argument. And my argument, and what I'll leave you with, is that it's structurally impossible for the leadership of the Democratic Party to deny the takeover of the progressives. The last little thing is now what about money? Money is really important in politics. People say, oh, we don't like money in politics. Well, I have news for you. We're in America. It's a capitalistic country. There's money in everything. And is that good? Should it be so powerful? No, but it's not going to change. We're a rich country, and money always influences everything: marketing, politics, everything you can think of. And I don't think that this newer, more refined version of the Democratic Party, which is called progressives, I don't think billionaires are going to support them. Now, there's a couple of exceptions. there's George Soros, there's Pritzker, there's Tom Steyer in California. There's this Chinese guy that I can't remember his name. Maybe there is Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, Mackenzie, whatever. There are a handful of billionaires who will literally give money to people who vilify them and want them destroyed. That's what Tom Steyer. Tom Steyer spent like $300 million on a campaign in California. He got 8% of the vote, and he literally was agreeing how horrible the billionaires are. But we have a lot more other billionaires who don't want to pay money to be humiliated. It's just not a popular kink. So the Democratic Party is going to shrink. It's already intensifying and becoming more shrill, and it's going to have less money. Now, whether or not that makes a really big difference in the social media world and the AI world, maybe not. But generally, money makes a difference in life. And my last prediction, after Hakeem Jeffries losing speakership and after Schumer quitting in late 2027, early 2028, or retiring, I think that if the Republicans have two big tasks in front of them, one of them is they can't whiff the succession from Trump. Trump is a unique political figure. We saw Bill Clinton in my lifetime. I saw Bill Clinton, I saw Barack Obama, and now we have Donald Trump. And they have all these three men have a lot in common. And they're just so powerfully charismatic, and they win elections. They know how to do it, and they have the fire in the belly, and they have the ego, and some of them are better than others at persuading Congress to do things. I think Obama was pretty bad at that, but nevertheless, who's going to succeed Trump? It's such an interesting question that'll change the fate for the party. And the second challenge is this epic amount of graft. And I don't see any Republicans criticize. They're too afraid to criticize Trump. But if a new Republican leadership emerges that is not corrupt or not as corrupt, and they are appealing and smart, at the moment for today, I think maybe that's Marco Rubio, but what do I know? I really don't know the party as well. I just read stuff. I think the Republicans have a really good shot at retaining their majority power in Congress and in the presidency and the Supreme Court if they don't screw up the succession and if they can get rid of the corruption. Those are two really big what ifs. But this is why democracy is so great. 250th anniversary in a couple of days. Our democracy is great, and I think it's really strong, and it saves this country from sectarianism and decline, which I think is what would happen if the progressives were in control. And I could be wrong about the progressives. They could get a popular leader, some new charismatic guy who's palatable to more people, or woman or trans person, I guess, if they believe the trans person or thing. That person could emerge. The progressives could win in 2028 and really dramatically change the course of this country to be more like a European socialist country. I'm not saying it's impossible. Charismatic leaders can really have a large impact on politics. But barring that, what's really interesting is that these parties can do whatever they want. The progressives can do whatever they want. They can stake their whole claim about anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, pro-taxes, pro-discrimination, but the people get to decide what the least worst option is. And that's great. That's a lot better than having a pharaoh in charge, I think. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate your time. Please follow me on Substack and YouTube and everywhere. Bye-bye.